This is the Awful Walker. This patchwork undead monster is built from leftovers of rotting animals, stinking of decay and compiled from horribly mismatched limbs and flesh. A pulsating mass of hundreds of feet of intestines is used to grapple and pull its screaming victims into its nauseating grasp. And this is a bakery drake. It's a little dragon who likes to bake. Today, you're gonna come along with me while I design an entire adventure, and then I'm gonna give it to you for free. You can download it at the link in the description. It's a gross body horror adventure with an ancient crypt and a mad cultist, and a lot of words like congealed and tumorous. But before you just download it and close this video, you can't run it without some of the key stuff that I'm about to talk about, so keep watching. The monster manual is full of great baddies, but especially if your players are really experienced with D&D, there comes a point where no level of creative description can make a well-known monster feel fresh. When they know a creature's damage resistances or tactics, even the most well-meaning player is gonna metagame at least a little. Could you reskin them or even homebrew your own monsters? Sure, if you've got time. But I have a much easier option for you. It's the Tome of Beasts series from Kobold Press. Kobold Press, who sponsored this video, is one of the most well-known and well-loved companies making third-party content for D&D. They have everything from campaign settings to whole books of new spells and more. The third volume of their Tome of Beasts monster series comes out this month. This volume has over 400 creatures, including new creations, creative twists on monsters you already know, and even some beasts that would make great mounts, animal companions, and wild shape options. And as you can see from the juxtaposition of the Awful Walker and the bakery drake, it covers all kinds of vibes. There's also a companion book called Tome of Beasts 3 Lairs, which is a collection of 23 standalone adventures that utilize these monsters. They're just like the adventure I'm giving you today, except longer and better and professionally edited. You can pre-order both books in print, PDF, or for VTT at the link in the description, and you're looking at delivery this very month. Now, let's write an adventure. I have to say, I flipped through every monster in this book and could have written like a dozen very different adventures with them. There are monsters for all kinds of geographic locations like the ocean, the desert, the frozen tundra, the rainforest, even a bunch of cute gardening themed monsters. There were enough jewel and crystal themed creatures that I almost went with an entire adventure about creatures living in an abandoned dragon horde. There are mechs and clockwork creatures, all kinds of fae, and some real world animals that just don't have stat blocks in the D&D canon yet, like hippos and musk deer. If you really like dragons or demons or giants or hags, there are whole sections where they've just built out new variants on classic monster types. I wanted to mention a few creatures I really loved that I didn't end up being able to fit into my adventure, like the Nullicorn, a corrupted unicorn that can spread an anti-magic blight to its opponents, or the Doppelixer, which could make your players scared of random potions forever, or the Catterball, a fae in the shape of a hairless cat that changes shape and eats rotten food, or the Diomedian Horse, a carnivorous clawed equine that is very difficult to train, but bonds forever with its rider if successfully domesticated. God, that would be a cool mount. As you can see, getting an idea for an adventure was not the problem. Picking one was the problem. At first, I started working on a nautical adventure, surprising absolutely no one, but there are actually 3 nautical adventures in the Lairs book already, so I thought I should try and bring something new to the table. Also, I have necromancy, body horror, brain rot right now because the 3rd book in the Locked Tomb series just came out, so I decided, hey, let's get gross. I know Halloween's over, but I just feel like horror is still the vibe. I picked out about 8 undead and undead adjacent creatures that I thought suited the vibes I wanted, and then I just jotted down their challenge ratings to figure out what level I wanted to write this adventure for. That is, of course, a privilege I have when writing an adventure for publication that DMs writing for their own parties don't really get, but I still wanted to stick within a level range that would be useful for people. If I were writing for level 18, this adventure probably wouldn't get as much play. Some of these monsters that I wanted to use, you would have to have a really high level party, and we just aren't all that lucky. One of the creatures I loved that I had to nix for this reason was the Bone Lord, which is CR 19. It has its own lair and it's very cool. Maybe someday I'll get to use it. I chose my monsters based on a few things. Of course, I had to make sure they could all be effectively used against the same party around level 5. Now, I'm not gonna pretend to be a pro at encounter balancing or anything, but there's a very helpful section in the Dungeon Master's Guide on page 82. It's a table you can use to just get a general idea of how many creatures and what levels levels of creatures it's reasonable for any given party to face. I did some quick math that made it pretty straightforward to group the creatures by difficulty. So obviously challenge rating is part of figuring this out, but I also want to think about monsters' strategy and explanations of why these certain things are in these places. Animated Offal, Offal Walkers, and Vampire Blossoms are all able to be created by necromancers. Between challenge rating and theme, I was able to narrow down my list to 3 monsters and an antagonistic NPC that I thought would work well together. Then I just put them in order from easiest to hardest. I have a general plot idea and a very loose outline, so let's put it together. Content warning. Body horror. We're gonna start with the adventure background and adventure hooks. I can always go back and tweak them if things change while I'm fleshing out the rest of the adventure, but I find that this is a good place to start to orient myself around the story. I know We Would Like to Pay You to Do This Thing isn't like the most creative adventure hook, but I also feel like it's the easiest one to target at all parties. It's a lot harder to publish an adventure that's like, this NPC that you love has gone missing. Not everyone even has an NPC they love. When writing for your own party, I think it's a really baller DM move to tie an adventure hook to at least one player character in a personal way. But when writing for publication, you gotta make sure your hooks are fairly universal. I went with one option where the party hears about the job and then travels to the town, and one where they're passing through the town and learn about the problem there. I did end up going back later and editing in an option where a player character could receive a letter from a family member or a friend living in the town, just in case a DM happened to feel like that fit their circumstances. Entering the crypt. For this one, I want to use an enemy that is pretty lightweight. I think it'll be easy for them to defeat, but it'll be a surprise, and I think swarms are fun. There are a few swarms in this book, and I like them. I feel like they demand a different kind of combat strategy from players than one or even a handful of enemies usually calls for. What I like about this swarm is that it looks like it's just flower petals at first, and what more reasonable place to find strewn petals than in a tomb, right? This is more to set the tone for the adventure than to actually present a credible threat. Sometimes people say not every combat in D&D needs to be deadly, but if you remove the threat and there's no other compelling element, you can end up with something really boring. I think this is a great example of an encounter that isn't necessarily threatening, but still serves a purpose. It quickly turns investigation into action, it establishes a mood and heightens tension, plus this creature actually has a meaningful role to play in the plot. The swarms store excess blood in their mass, causing their white petals to turn pink and red. Creatures that feed on blood, such as vampires, cultivate the blossoms, allowing them to drink the stored blood without alerting others to their presence. This is very key to my plot here. I really wanted to include an NPC in this adventure because there's a whole section with little NPC templates, and there's an NPC type called Atavist, which is a cultist. They do blood magic, and it says here, many of them can't survive without regular transfusions of blood. It sounds to me like the kind of creature that would benefit from some vampire blossoms, huh? I will also say, in an adventure that's meant to function as a one-shot and has multiple combat encounters, I want at least one of them to be pretty quick and easy. I've planned 3 possible encounters, and I definitely don't want characters, or players for that matter, going into the final encounter already worn out from several long, drawn-out fights. Okay, so that's the Vampire Blossoms, the Catacombs. So I gotta figure this out here. There's some information that needs to be communicated from the NPC, and it's possible that they will just kill him. Personally, I find it pretty disappointing when you complete a quest or something and you never actually figure out why any of it was happening. This is a classic problem, right? You give important information to an antagonistic character and you run the risk that your party will just stomp them and never learn what they knew. At first, I wrote this section as combat with the option for players to choose to talk instead of fight. Leaps from the shadows, yells, "I opened it, I have rights to what lies within," and attacks. A little cheesy, but that's okay. But once I started writing down all the stuff the characters might learn from him, a problem started to take shape. All right, what do they need to learn from him? They need to learn, all right, he opened the tomb, and then we'll say why. There is a creature in the catacombs. He plans to capture the creature. He's in over his head. That's a lot of information, and since no other creatures in this tomb use language, this is pretty much their only opportunity to learn the whole story of why the tomb was opened in the first place. An atavist is not particularly dangerous to a party of 5 level 5s. there is a very good chance they would just kill him on the first round and never get the opportunity to talk with him. So maybe I shouldn't have them fight at all. That probably makes the most sense. Like, they can choose to fight him if they want to, but I shouldn't have him attack them. Pretty simple lesson there. Don't want players to kill somebody, don't have that somebody attack first. Okay, so now they come down the stairs, he leaps out. I mean, they might attack him right then. It's kind of up to them. If they want to talk to him, they can, and he provides information. But if they want to move past him into the catacombs, which of course they do, he won't let them, so he will either fight them or they can roll a charisma check of some kind to try and get him out of the way. That's a lot cleaner, I think. Of course, once they have the information, they can totally kill him, so it makes way more sense for me to have this NPC threaten the party after they've already talked. Easy fix. This is the final encounter. In the flesh. I started off the final encounter with a few options for how the players could find the creatures or how the creatures might find them. Ultimately, the catacombs I've designed are really straightforward, and it would be hard to miss the final encounter unless you just turn around and leave. But I still want players to feel like they have agency and navigate the space in whatever way they choose, be that using stealth, detailed investigation, tracking, or something else. Which brings us to the encounter itself. I picked out two of my favorite body horror monsters from Tome of Beasts 3, which I think complement each other really well. So I really like the combination of animated offal and offal walkers because obviously they are both made of just like gross masses of rotting flesh, which is great thematic parallel. But also offal walkers are not really a threat on their own. They're not very strong, but they have the ability to basically lasso and pull opponents towards them. Meanwhile, the animated offal is pretty strong and has some really cool capabilities like subsume, where it basically just absorbs a creature, but there's just one of it. So if fire is focused on the animated offal, it can go down pretty fast. Combining them together is great because then the offal walkers can like distract the party, separate them, draw them apart, and basically capture prey for the animated offal. Since the first combat is trivial and the second is both optional and easy, this final encounter is really the meat of the adventure when it comes to fighting. So I wanted it to be genuinely difficult and hopefully scary. Considering it's supposed to be deadly for a party of this size and level, I think ultimately it'll be good for them to go into it relatively fresh. Now, is it possible that they will use up some high-level spells and waste wild shapes and rages and stuff like that on the early combats? Absolutely, and that will make the final encounter more challenging. The DM's guide is very intent on randomizing loot. It has a bunch of tables that you roll on just based on the monster's challenge rating. But the only allowance it makes for the rationale of this loot is that if a monster wouldn't hoard treasure, the treasure can just be left over from the monster's other victims, and that if a monster wouldn't rationally carry coin, just make it carry gems or art objects instead, which doesn't really make any sense. I'd rather pick loot that makes sense for the creature and the story, and in this case, it's a perfect setup for picking powerful magic items off of some long-dead necromancer's body. Players were promised maybe some ancient magical item in here. I thought about the Ring of Necrotic Resistance, but animated offal deals a ton of necrotic damage, and it's like, ooh, maybe that's good though. Maybe the necromancer's wearing the Ring of Necrotic Resistance and that's the only reason why there's still a corpse. I scrolled back and made some quick edits to specify that the other coffins in the catacombs were cleaned out of organic matter but still had metal bits floating around. That way, seeing the necromancer's desiccated corpse could actually be a clue to the ring's power. I think that's pretty neat. Now all we need is concluding the adventure. The adventurers are given their 1,500 gold pieces. Lothar has fled. And that's the bones. I would call something like that a first draft. It took me about 2 hours working from a loose outline. I then added flavor text, ran it past some friends, made edits based on their feedback, and then put it all together into a nice PDF with composite graphics that I spent way too long making with media from like 7 different stock image sites because I am just incapable of doing anything low-key. I know undead and underground catacombs are pretty common themes in D&D, but what really spoke to me about these specific creatures was how unexpected they were. This isn't just like a zombie or a lich, it's something that I think any party would be really surprised and honestly disgusted to encounter. And if you like tricksy classic monsters like mimics and gelatinous cubes, but your players are just too savvy for those, something like the Swarm of Vampire Blossoms is perfect. Even though there are so many different tones and concepts in this book, I found it really easy to group together monsters that felt similar and even add an NPC that was really well suited. And that would be equally possible for pretty much any theme. And that was with me operating under the restriction of only using monsters from this book, which isn't what anyone else would be doing. You'd be adding these 400 creatures to the existing monster manual, so you could use monsters from Tome of Beasts as extra special flavor. Maybe the minions are a creature that your players are already familiar with, but the boss is something they've never seen before. Maybe a mount or familiar form in this book is a cool reward for players at the end of an important arc or a big quest. Maybe your players travel to a new continent or a new plane and you want to use all unfamiliar monsters to really make them feel like they're not in Kansas anymore. How you use the book is entirely up to you. If you want to download the adventure I wrote for this video, Flesh and Blood, you can get it at the link in the description. But remember that you need Tome of Beasts 3 in order to run it, and you can pre-order that at the Kobold Press website, also linked in the description. And if my adventure isn't your style, you need something for a different party level, or you just want more, make sure to also pick up Tome of Beasts 3 Lairs, which is full of awesome adventures using these monsters.